All right, I've got a story for you today. It's called The Bummer Lamb.
So, this story, it really starts with a sound. Imagine this. A man named DeMarcus hears a cell door slam shut. And for him, that clang, it wasn't just noise. It was the sound of his entire world, the one he knew, coming to a dead end.
He's standing there, right, in this tiny, bare room. Just a cot, a shelf, a tiny little window. And suddenly, this awful clarity just hits him. You know that feeling? He realized, this is it. There's nowhere else to fall. This was rock bottom.
I mean, his whole world had just completely fallen apart. He's 39 years old, and he has lost everything. He's facing a federal indictment, the business he spent his life building, gone. Savings account, wiped clean. And his wife, she took their daughter and left. He was left with absolutely nothing.
And on the inside, time it works differently. Without that ambition he'd always had, that thing that pushed him forward every day, the days just started to melt into weeks. And the faith he grew up with, it felt so far away, almost like a story about some other person, not him.
Think about the contrast here. His life went from high-powered boardrooms and all that success to a cold, concrete floor. He'd lived this life where, honestly, God just didn't seem necessary. But now, here he is 3 months in, and he finds himself just holding this old water-stained Bible he got from the prison library. And right there, holding that book, that's when the first little crack appeared in all his old certainties. He started to think, wait a minute, what if my entire foundation was wrong? It wasn't about one mistake anymore. He was realizing the whole way he'd built his life might have been flawed from the start.
So, mostly just because he was bored, Marcus starts going to the chapel services they held. They were run by this really quiet chaplain, a guy named Brother Elias. And it was in that room, a room with a low ceiling just filled with this quiet desperation from all the other men, that he heard a story that was about to change absolutely everything for him. One day, Brother Elias just asks the room a simple question. He says, "Do any of you know what a bummer lamb is?"
Well, a bummer lamb. It's the weakest one in the whole flock. It's an outcast, usually rejected by its own mother. It has zero chance of surviving on its own. It is completely and totally helpless.
But here's the thing. The shepherd doesn't just leave it there to die. No. He takes that one specific lamb, brings it right into his own home. He sets it down by the fire to keep it warm. He feeds it himself from a bottle. And every single day, he holds it close to his chest. So close that the little lamb learns the sound of his very heartbeat. And this is the whole point of the story. Once that lamb is finally strong enough to go back to the flock, it's different. When the shepherd calls out to all his sheep in the morning, guess who comes running first? It's always the bummer lambs. And why? Because when they were at their absolute lowest, when they had nothing, the shepherd came to them personally. They don't just know his voice, they know it deep in their bones. And hearing that, sitting there on a hard plastic chair, something inside Marcus just broke. He saw it so clearly. He was that lamb. He was the bummer lamb. And he just started to weep, not just out of sadness, but from this powerful, overwhelming realization that he had been loved this whole time in a way he had never, ever recognized before. Now, this wasn't some big, flashy, dramatic moment. It was the start of something really quiet, a deep, personal transformation. He began to learn how to hear that shepherd's voice for himself in his own life. And this change, it wasn't just some feeling he had inside. You could actually see it in what he did. He started praying, but with this raw honesty he'd never had before. He started writing letters to his daughter. He began helping other guys with their paperwork, their appeals, their classes. And he wasn't doing any of it for show. He was doing it because, slowly and quietly, he'd become someone who genuinely cared. So when the day finally came for him to be released, his daughter was there waiting for him at the gate. She was 9 years old by then. And as he held her in his arms, it hit him. His story didn't end that day he walked into prison. It had actually just begun. He finally understood. The absolute worst thing that had ever happened to him turned out to be the truest, kindest mercy he'd ever known. It wasn't the kind of mercy that saves you from the fire. It was the kind that comes and sits with you in the fire. Think about it. He had gone into that prison a completely broken man, totally convinced his life was over, but he walked out known, truly known, for the very first time. The Renewal Project exists to preserve stories like this.
Not to persuade, but to remember. Not to pressure, but to reflect. If this story stirred something in you, let it sit. Faith often begins not with answers, but with a quiet willingness to hear. Like and follow for more.